And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. Today, we have all the way from the land down under, Andrea Putting. She is here from puttingwords.com, and she's going to talk to us all today about publishing. And Andrea, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful. So, books. These are things that people, they talk about it a lot. They're like, man, I'd really love to have a book. And people always put that in. You hear they get to a certain point in their life or they're in their business or whatever, and they're like, I really need to put a book together. But then there's the arduous task of actually doing the work. And so talk to me a little bit about what you see for people when they kind of get that journey started, and what does that look like? And then we'll kind of walk through the whole process.
Yes, when you start writing your book, it's a big thing, and you don't know whether you're ever going to get it finished and get it out there. And then a lot of people will write the book and then they just sit on it because they don't know what to do with it, because it's such a big, expansive thing. And they try and tell you that writing the book is the hardest thing. It's like, I don't know. Because you've got your story, you know all about what you're doing, and you can get that down. And but writing your book, what I found when I write, especially a book, is you suddenly realize how much you know. And it gives you this sense of awe about yourself, and a sense, it builds up your own confidence in that you actually do know what you're talking about.
Nice.
So it confirms all of that for you as well. Besides anything else, doing that gives you that confidence to go out into the world and say, hey, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I know this stuff. So it all confirms it, gets it all into one place, and allows you to move on with what you're doing.
And we know there's a lot of different personality types out there. There's the people who are the thinkers, so there's the people who are the doers, the socialites, the decision makers, the people who focus on a lot of the details and that sort of thing. I think when you talk about somebody who, kind of builds that confidence, because they're able to start the book, what about the people who sit down and they're like, man, I got all this ideas in my head, and they sit down and then they look at the screen or look at the piece of paper, whatever they're using as their, the typewriter, they look at whatever what their tool of choice is, and then they get silence, and they get that proverbial writer's block, and there's a certain percentage of people who would love to write a book, but that's their first stumbling block. How do they get over that?
I find being organized helps, but I know that that's not going to help everyone. And a lot of my writing is pretty much I sit down and have no idea what I'm going to write. However, when I write a book, it helps me to have an outline of what I'm going to talk about. So, it might just be a chapter title or a chapter idea. But then once you have that, it just seems to help with the next phase. It's like, well, today I'm going to write about trees. And a particular tree, and defining what you're going to write about just can help to start that flow. And if nothing else, just write whatever's in your head. Just write anything. Write gobbledygook until the stuff starts to flow. So sitting there with a blank screen doesn't help. I know that I've done that a lot. I remember my biggest memory in high school is that when I start to think about me as a writer, sitting in my classroom in my final year of high school, being told to write an essay and writing nothing the whole lesson. So I know that feeling of something's not always going to be flowing. But if you can't, just write anything.
Anything.
Just write until something starts flowing.
I think it's like anything in life. The idea is, most people think they need to sit down and they need a plan before they do any major endeavor. And sometimes it's the idea of just start the endeavor and just start the action of actually moving forward, moving in perpetuity, because sometimes that's going to give you a lot more clarity than planning. Because planning, you can Obviously, if you're trying to get it into space and the jeopardy of failure is so high, you better have a plan. If your spacesuit fails and you're out in the space, that's not going to go well for you. But if you fail in just writing a book, your tolerance for failure is pretty low, or yeah, sorry, rather, is pretty high, because I mean the risk of failure doesn't really hurt anybody. So the idea is, if you could just start the momentum of doing something, that's what's going to be so much easier. And then you're going to start to see some clarity on things around you. And this happens in businesses when people start businesses, or start a marketing endeavor, or start a new sales strategy or anything like that. They sit too much in planning and not enough in functional operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing that there with planning and organizing is that we've got to understand that that suits some people. It doesn't suit everybody. For other people, if you make them sit down and plan and organize what they're going to do, it's never going to happen, because their brain doesn't work that way. For some people, it is. Let's just sit down and allow the flow to go.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of that. And it's really important for people to recognize where they sit in that spectrum of that, because you get stuck in the, it should just flow, or I should have it all organized. But if your brain doesn't work that way, forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, that's very true. I know for me, if I need to write something, I kind of just need to hit it probably 6, 7, 8 times, and different angles, and then sort of where they all kind of come into a point. That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah.
Everything that goes off on strange tangents, you're like, no, that probably was just I was getting some hand exercise. Getting the good cramp going. And
It's skirting you around until you fine point that.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, once somebody gets to that point of, now I've got a book and it's in its first phase, what's sort of the next thing that somebody would look at doing? What do they need to hit next?
Next thing is you must have your book edited.
Mm.
Yeah. Do not let your book out into the world without editing it.
I was down at Podfest, actually, and that's exactly what a guy was talking about his book. He said the second most important thing about writing a book is having somebody else edit it, because they're going to see it from a lens that's very different than yours, and find all the things that you just assume to be okay. Scrap that chapter, and it's not even just probably for words; it's for more content and that sort of thing, I imagine.
Yeah. So there's various reasons. One of them is when you read your own stuff, you know in your head what it's supposed to say, and I often find that I'll leave out a word, or I'll write the wrong word. Some of those words that are so close, you write the wrong word, but you'll read it as that. And so that's all got to be, when you have someone edit it, or sometimes you need a proofreader as well to find those up. But also there's things like you might write something, but it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to you, but doesn't make sense to the reader, or you repeat yourself. Things like that just happen. There's something in the book, it's they like with my editor, she'll go, well, that really should have gone here. If you can switch these things around, it's going to make things
So
fly better.
So to look at things that are grammatical, look at things that are flow driven, maybe ideals that, just aren't congruent. Anything else that are majors that needs to be found in the editing?
A lot of it is just the flow of the book, and knowing where things should sit. And sometimes you've missed out on that great introduction, or there can be those pieces missing that are vital to a book, that a good editor is going to pick up.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, your editor, typically, how do you find a really good editor?
Yeah, fortunately, I have one.
Yeah.
With somebody I know, and does book coaching and editing, and she's just really good. So, yeah, that was a stumble for me. You ask around. You need to ask around people who have written books, who their editor was, and what their experience with them is.
Yeah,
Or I can put you in touch with my editor.
with your editor. Yeah. Sounds like she's done a great job.
She has. She does do a
That's
great
awesome.
job.
Now, you've got the book edited. What happens next?
Well, then it comes to me. No, then you've got to decide how you're going to publish the book.
Yeah.
So there's options to publishing book. There's traditional publishing, which is really hard to get into. Somebody said to me the other day that publishers have set themselves up as gods because you send your book in, and as far as they're concerned, is you send it in, and if you don't hear from us in 2 months, we're not going to accept your book. No, well, not even that simple email they could have on standard just says, "Sorry, we're not interested." Click. Can't even do that 5-second thing. Yeah, but they are really hard to get into, and there are a lot of pros and cons about traditional publishing. And one of my clients was looking at traditional publishing. She had a publisher interested, and in the end she decided not to go with them because of their demands in what was required to change her book. Otherwise, we all kind of have that dream of our book being picked up by a traditional publisher because it just kind of feels good. You think it seems like it's an easy option, but you still got to do all the marketing and be involved in that yourself anyway.
Yeah. So what's the when you talk about publishing, what are those steps in publishing? You've got it. Is it the editing and putting it together? Is it the packaging and the marketing? What sort of happens in the publishing phase?
In the publishing, what I do, so I kind of like on the hybrid part of publishing. So what I do is that I work closely with an author, and we look at the brand of their book. So what is it that they want from their book? How do they want their book to look and feel? And we get the cover designed, and they can, my designer comes up with 3, 4, 5 different designs, and then they can chop and change and do what they like until we get the cover that speaks to them.
Mm.
And then there's the formatting, and this is the thing that takes the longest time and takes the most going back and forwards with the author, which is something that they wouldn't get anywhere else, I don't think, because it does take a lot of time. But I get the book to feel like them. So when they open the book, it speaks of them, and you open their books and you want to read it. People open them and then just go, yeah, I want to read this book because it looks beautiful. It has their essence in the book.
Yeah.
So that's a joyful thing to do. I really enjoy doing that because it's creative and they just come alive when they see their books. Then we have to get the book into the world. So I put it into a few different places so that the book becomes an internationally available book. So one of those, of course, is Amazon. And so, but you go onto Google and you Google the title of their books, and it comes up in all the different online sellers across the world, even in foreign languages, which is kind of cool to see your
Yeah,
own book listed in a foreign language. So then we get it into being a bestseller on Amazon. We do a Amazon launch with that so that they become a bestseller. So there's all those categories and things that we have to play with and find the best categories for their book, and there's a lot of consultation back and forth about which categories it should be in and where they want the book to be placed.
So how do you take it from just being a book on Amazon to being a book on Amazon as a bestseller? What are the key drivers to bring that together?
It's really important to find the right categories in with the book. So it's the categories that relate to the book, but aren't necessarily the ones that require 100,000 book sales to become bestseller, because doing a campaign to get 100,000 in 24 hours is not easy.
Yeah.
So it's all about what you can get in 24, the sales you can get in 24 hours.
What's the number that kind of the magic number for somebody in that to hit a category? When?
It depends on category.
Mm.
It really depends on the
What are some
categories.
samples?
They can be, I can tell you, it can be from anything from 1 to 100,000. It's across the board. I can tell it's
So
all
you
over.
say I've got a best-selling book in this category, and I've sold one book.
Well, there are some like that, and they're categories that you're unlikely to want your book in. Your book, or your book's unlikely to be in the category, like spiritual books in Arabic or something. You know, you
So you just got to find. That's so funny. So you got to really find a category as your first book to dominate that's so obscure and write specifically for that category. Then you're going to be a best-selling author. So your second time you publish a book, you can go to a little bit more of a higher category that's a little less obscure and climb the category ladder.
But you've got to have your book has to be legitimately within that category. So that's
Yeah, you
really
just design
important.
your book for the lowest hanging fruit category, and now you've got it. You're top.
Well, if you really want to write a spiritual book in Arabic, oh, then go for it.
Where do you see the list of these categories? and
They're,
and what's
they're
required?
yeah. So they're in Amazon, and there's a lot of things with Amazon that you have to do because they have ghost categories that come up, which they come up on when you're selecting them, but you can't find them on Amazon. So there's a lot of tweaking and things to do with that because Amazon change things all the time. So if you get information given to you from somebody
Yep.
who has written a book even 6 months ago, it may not be valid. So yeah, it's a bit of fun. But once you've got it in those categories, then it's you've got to set this campaign and you've got to look at everything you can do to intensify your sales when you do this launch. So you set up all your social media for this day. You key up all your followers to buy the book on this day. This is the day that you send it out to all your list or all your buddies list, to everyone that you can get to buy on this particular day is how you do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what do you find a success from authors who look to publish a book and create financial success versus authors who look to publish a book and don't achieve financial success from their book? What's the ratio of success in this if they're looking to monetize off of their book on direct sales?
Well, that one's a hard one for me to answer. I think there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction here,
Yep.
because people who write fiction books are solely focused on selling
The book.
the book. People who write nonfiction are often using it as a lead magnet with the other work that they do.
Yep.
And so it doesn't mean that it can't be a financially bring you in a good amount, but it's generally a different way of looking at it, and use it. You can use the book to go into a world and say, I'm a bestseller author. It gives you that expertise in
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's awesome. Now, if people want to reach out to you, the best way to get a hold of you is puttingwords.com. Is that correct?
Yep, they can do that. And or they can just Google my name, Andrea Putting, and I'm the only one in the world, so they'll find me.
Makes it so easy to find you. That's amazing. That's
Yep.
awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed the process of understanding what it takes to build out a book, because it's something that I know a lot of people think of. And if you can demystify it, I think that's super exciting and make it more available for people, rather than this thing that's just so far off in the future that they can never achieve. So that's amazing to take that apart. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. And guys, this is the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you on the next one.